Welcome to The Debate. Last year, Americans legally wagered over $119 billion on sports.
Which is just, wow, a staggering number.
Right? I mean, that is enough money to fund the entire gross domestic product of a small nation. And, they didn't do it by flying to the desert
Or walking into some smoky casino, right?
Exactly. They did it almost entirely from their couches or, while waiting in line for coffee or just sitting in traffic.
Yeah, we've effectively transformed the smartphone into a 24/7, just totally frictionless casino. The visual evidence is everywhere now.
It really is.
Like watching a professional game, it used to be this collective, almost linear experience, right? Focused entirely on the physical contest. Now, if you look at the screen, it's basically a living, breathing financial ticker.
Yeah, live odds, point spreads.
Flashing constantly. Over-unders with every single possession.
Which brings us to the stark crossroads we're examining today. The rapid expansion of this industry forces us to ask a really fundamental question. Is the legalization of sports betting a triumph of personal liberty, consumer protection, and economic growth?
Or is it a predatory enterprise, one that fuels a public health crisis disguised as, casual entertainment?
So it's this profound tension between the freedom to wager your own money
and the reality of a highly optimized, financialized ecosystem that has just penetrated every single layer of sports media.
Right? So to set the baseline for our listeners, I will argue that a regulated betting market champions individual autonomy, successfully eliminates incredibly dangerous black markets, and generates immense public value through tax revenue and consumer protections.
And I will argue that the gamified, frictionless nature of these mobile gambling apps aggressively exploits vulnerable populations. This industry prioritizes corporate profit over public health, using behavioral engineering that ultimately compromises the very integrity of the sports we love.
Okay, so let's start with the foundational premise of my argument, which really rests on personal liberty and, the historical reality of prohibition.
Sure.
Wagering is, at its core, a legitimate form of entertainment. Individual freedom fundamentally includes the right of an adult to spend their discretionary income on a basketball game, right? Just as they might on a concert ticket.
Well, a concert ticket doesn't...
But let me just say, more importantly, we have to look at what happens when you try to ban this behavior. Prohibition of sports betting historically failed. Completely.
Okay, but...
Banning it never stopped anyone from placing a bet. It merely pushed millions of consumers toward illicit local bookies or, illegal offshore websites.
Yeah, but replacing a local bookie with a multi-billion-dollar app engineered by behavioral psychologists isn't just bringing it out of the shadows. It is weaponizing it.
I see why you think that. But let me give you a different perspective on what those regulations actually achieve, right? What legalization does is provide a safe harbor.
A safe harbor?
Yes. It mandates fair odds, it ensures the financial transactions are encrypted, and it requires strict age verification protocols that simply did not exist in the underground market.
Right, but...
Without a regulated market, consumers face an ecosystem totally devoid of fraud protection. If an offshore bookmaker in a different country just refuses to pay out your winnings, you have zero legal recourse. Regulated capitalism provides that necessary oversight.
I'm sorry, I don't buy that premise. Praising the financial encryption of these apps is like praising the structural integrity of a bear trap.
A bear trap? Come on.
No, seriously. Yes, it's beautifully engineered, your credit card data is perfectly safe, the metal won't break, but its sole purpose is still to lock onto your leg and not let go.
That's a bit extreme.
It is a fundamental misdirection to celebrate secure transactions when the transaction itself is the harm.
Okay, but a bear trap is designed to maim. A sportsbook's offering a service that the vast majority of users, engage with safely.
Do they, though? Let's actually break down the mechanics of the marketing tactics driving this industry. Because we aren't talking about a passive service that just sits there waiting for you to use it.
Sure, they market themselves.
We are talking about aggressive push notifications, deposit matches, and the infamous risk-free bet.
Which is a standard promotional tool. Almost every modern tech platform uses some form of customer acquisition incentive.
It is not just an incentive. It is a psychological trap. Let's explain to the audience how a risk-free bet actually works in practice.
Go ahead.
A user wagers their own real money, say $500. The app tells them, hey, if you lose, you get it back. But if they lose, they don't get their cash back to pay their rent or their car payment.
They get site credit.
Exactly. Site credit. To ever see that value again, they are forced to place another bet. It's called a playthrough requirement. They're structurally locked into the gambling ecosystem.
Okay, but
These aren't consumer protections. These are behavioral engineering tactics meant to bypass the brain's risk assessment centers and just normalize high-stakes behavior.
now if you're listening to this, you might be thinking, hey, I throw $10 on my favorite football team every Sunday. What's the big deal?
Right.
And for that listener, it isn't a big deal. The comparison to a bear trap implies this inevitability of addiction that simply doesn't apply to the vast majority of people who bet responsibly.
But the apps aren't designed for the responsible bettor.
Well, the regulatory oversight we have now ensures that when a user wants to set a deposit limit or initiate a self-exclusion protocol where they literally ban themselves from the app, the platform legally must comply. Offshore books never offered self-exclusion tools.
Yeah, but that assumes the user has the capacity to self-regulate against an algorithm that is actively optimizing to break down that exact capacity. I mean, it is a David and Goliath scenario.
Is it really, though?
Absolutely. A deposit limit tool buried in a settings menu simply does not counteract the billions of dollars spent pushing these gamified features to users' phones every single day. The user interface borrows heavily from variable ratio scheduling.
Like slot machines?
The exact same psychological mechanism used in slot machines. It's not about the $10 Sunday bettor. It's about the fact that this technology creates friction-free deposits. You can link your bank account via Apple Pay and transfer thousands of dollars in less than 3 seconds while you are emotionally compromised after a bad loss.
I hear you, but we must acknowledge that people were already gambling to the point of financial ruin long before Face ID and mobile apps existed, right?
Sure, but the
crucial difference now is visibility. Visibility, data, and recourse. Because everything is tracked, we can see exactly who is betting and how much they are betting. The state and the operators have the data to intervene in ways a neighborhood bookie never could.
Oh, the visibility exists for the corporations, absolutely. But let's talk about how they actually use that data. Because it is entirely asymmetrical.
How so?
They track everything, yes, but they use it to identify who is a VIP. And in the gambling industry, a VIP or a high roller is frequently just a problem gambler.
If the algorithm detects that a user is consistently losing large sums of money, the company assigns them a personal VIP host who texts them free credits and concert tickets to keep them playing.
That is a very harsh characterization of customer service.
Wait, it gets worse. Let's look at the flip side of that data tracking. What happens if a user is actually good at sports betting? What happens if they possess a mathematical edge and start winning consistently?
They get limited.
The app tracks that data too, and they immediately throttle or ban that user. They will limit a winning bettor to wagering no more than $5. So the ecosystem actively bans the winners, while assigning personal concierges to the compulsive losers.
I mean, they are a business. Structural.
Look, I'm not convinced that isolated corporate misbehavior invalidates the entire regulatory framework. In fact, what you just described proves why we need a regulated market.
How? By letting them continue?
No, because state gaming commissions across the country are actively investigating and finding operators for aggressive VIP programs, precisely because they have the legal authority to do so. Regulators are stepping in to ban the term risk-free in advertising because it's deceptive.
But it took them years to do that.
That is regulated capitalism functioning exactly as it should. The system identifies a bad practice and the state enforces a correction.
Yeah, but they are constantly playing catch-up. Corporate accountability is lagging dangerously behind the technological innovation of these platforms. And while the regulators hand out occasional fines, the public health toll mounts.
I wouldn't say the toll is...
We are seeing a massive surge in addiction, specifically among young adults and college-aged men. This demographic is tech-savvy, highly engaged with sports, and particularly vulnerable to the illusion that their sheer knowledge of basketball or football can somehow beat the algorithm.
Well, let's actually talk about that mathematical reality because I think it transitions us into the second major theme we need to address:
Okay.
the broader economic ecosystem and the integrity of the sports themselves. If we weigh the individual risks, which are serious, and I do not dismiss them, against the broader societal benefits, the economic engine is undeniable.
If you value engagement over health, sure.
There is a reason major sports leagues, broadcasting networks, and analytics companies have fully embraced legal betting. It profoundly increases digital engagement and television viewership.
Because it keeps people watching a blowout they otherwise wouldn't care about.
Exactly. And that has immense tangible value. Think about how a traditional sports broadcast works. If a team is winning by 20 points in the third quarter, traditional viewership plummets.
Right.
Advertisers lose money, networks lose leverage. But a fan who has a financial stake in the game, maybe they bet the over-under on the total points scored, or a specific player to get 10 rebounds, that fan is statistically far more likely to watch the entire broadcast.
Sure, they're hooked.
That minute-by-minute retention boosts advertising rates, sponsorship value, and creates thousands of jobs across sports media, broadcasting, and tech infrastructure.
Yes, it boosts engagement, but we have to ask, what exactly are those fans betting on to stay engaged, and how does the math actually work?
Well, there are many types of bets.
You mentioned the over-under. But the real revenue driver for these companies is the parlay. Let's explain what a parlay is, because it is the engine of the industry's profitability.
It's a combination bet. You time multiple wagers together for a higher payout.
Right, but mathematically, it is essentially selling a lottery ticket disguised as sports knowledge. In a standard single bet, the house has a mathematical edge, what the industry calls the VIG, or vigorish.
The standard house edge, yeah.
If you and I bet on a coin flip, true odds say we double our money. But a sportsbook pays you $190 on a $100 bet, keeping that $10 difference. That's the VIG. It's a 5% tax just for playing.
Which is transparent.
But in a parlay, if a user ties 5 different player statistics together, say, the quarterback throws 2 touchdowns, the receiver gets 80 yards, and so on, all 5 things must happen for the bet to win.
Which is why the payout is so high.
The sportsbook aggressively promotes the massive, life-changing payout, but mathematically, multiplying the probability of 5 separate, correlated events causes the house edge to balloon from 5% to sometimes 30 or 40%.
Well, it's a higher risk for higher reward.
It is a mathematically terrible bet for the consumer, and yet it is the exact bet these apps push the hardest through their user interfaces.
I understand the math, but, I would frame it differently. Consumers willingly accept terrible mathematical odds every single day for the sake of entertainment.
Like what?
The odds of winning the state lottery are astronomically worse than hitting a 5-leg sports parlay. Yet state governments actively run and promote the lottery. People go to the movie theater and spend $30 on a ticket and popcorn for 2 hours of entertainment.
But that's a fixed cost.
If someone wagers $20 on a parlay and gets 3 hours of heightened excitement while watching a football game, that is a voluntary exchange of money for entertainment.
But the cost isn't just the $20. The cost is what this normalization does to the product itself. The normalization of betting fundamentally taints the integrity of sports. We're seeing immense, unprecedented pressure placed on athletes, referees, and coaches.
Oh, we have always had high-profile betting scandals, even during Prohibition.
Not like this.
The difference now is that the regulated markets tracking systems actually catch them. When an anomalous amount of money comes in on an obscure college basketball game, the centralized data systems flag it immediately, and the leagues can investigate. Under a black market, those games were just fixed in silence.
They're caught, yes, but only after the pressure has been applied. And we aren't just talking about organized crime fixing games. Look at the shift in fan culture. Look at the targeted online harassment of players by angry bettors.
I mean, trolls exist everywhere on the internet.
If a 20-year-old college athlete misses a free throw at the end of a meaningless game that happens to blow a point spread or ruin a 5-leg parlay, their social media is instantly flooded with vitriol, death threats, and abuse from strangers who just lost money.
That is unfortunate, but the integrity of competition, the very soul of why we watch sports, the pursuit of athletic excellence, is being sacrificed for this advertising value. Fans are no longer rooting for their home team to win. They are aggressively rooting for their own point guard to fail, so their underbet hits. It deeply corrupts the relationship between the fan and the athlete.
That is undeniably a harsh reality of the internet age. But, we don't ban fantasy football because people get angry online, and we don't ban the stock market because day traders lose money and complain on message boards. But this is specifically engineered to be addictive.
We have to look at the structural alternative. If we acknowledge that gambling will happen regardless, and century-long prohibition has proven it absolutely will, isn't it better that the state captures billions in tax revenue
At what moral cost, though?
It is pragmatic governance. By legalizing and regulating this industry, we are taking billions of dollars directly out of the hands of illicit organizations and offshore accounts. We are bringing that capital into the legitimate economy.
So we become the casino.
And critically, state governments use a portion of those captured funds to explicitly finance problem gambling programs, public education, and local infrastructure. The offshore black market never contributed a single dime to an addiction resource center or a local school. We are harnessing a naturally occurring human behavior and extracting public utility from it.
That's a compelling point on paper. But I urge you to consider the profound moral hazard of what you're describing. When a state becomes financially dependent on the addiction of its own citizens, its priorities inevitably shift.
They're funding the programs to help them.
Yes, some tax revenue goes to problem gambling programs, but that is deeply circular logic. The state is legally sanctioning and heavily taxing the exact mechanism that creates the disease just to fund a fraction of the cure, all while keeping a massive cut for the general fund.
Well, you regulate what you cannot eradicate.
But we aren't just regulating a pre-existing baseline of behavior, we are aggressively expanding it. By putting a sportsbook in every pocket, integrating live odds into the broadcasting booth, and advertising it on every commercial break, we are manufacturing new demand.
We're bringing it to the surface.
We are convincing people who never would have sought out a bookie to start risking their savings. However, and I will concede a critical point here,
Okay.
pushing the industry completely back underground tomorrow would strip away the consumer protections and the state tax revenue we do have. A pure black market is undeniably dangerous. It relies on loan sharks rather than credit checks.
Exactly.
So the solution is not necessarily a naive return to prohibition. It is recognizing that what we have right now is a sanctioned, highly optimized extraction machine that lacks basic public health safeguards.
And I will happily concede that the current environment requires much more robust regulatory oversight. We are in the infancy of this legal market. We urgently need to protect underage users and vulnerable populations from the exact aggressive marketing tactics you outlined.
Right.
If an operator is deliberately assigning VIP hosts to users displaying signs of compulsive behavior, they should be heavily penalized or lose their license entirely.
Which they rarely do.
The leagues, the media networks, and the sportsbooks must be held accountable to ensure that the entertainment value doesn't curdle into the harassment of athletes. Regulated capitalism only functions properly if the regulators are as sophisticated, well-funded, and aggressive as the capitalists they oversee.
They absolutely have to be, because right now they are vastly outgunned by the data analytics departments of these tech companies.
Sure.
The core concern remains that the industry's primary benefit, this massive economic boom and state tax windfall, is built directly on the back of the 5% of vulnerable populations experiencing genuine financial ruin. We cannot treat catastrophic gambling addiction as just an acceptable cost to doing business.
Well, as we draw to a close on today's discourse, my stance remains that a transparent, regulated sports betting market is vastly superior to the reality of prohibition. Rooted in individual autonomy, this framework brings a pervasive human behavior into the light.
It brings it to their smartphones.
By doing so, we eliminate the profound dangers of the black market, offer vital tax revenues for public infrastructure, and fundamentally enhance enhance the entertainment value of sports for millions of responsible adults. The focus moving forward should be on refining the regulatory oversight, punishing bad corporate actors, and improving interventions, not restricting the freedom of the consumer.
And my position remains that the industry as it currently operates through highly accessible and gamified mobile apps prioritizes corporate profit far above public health. The aggressive marketing, the frictionless deposits, and the mathematically punishing parlays require strict, sweeping accountability to prevent widespread financial devastation.
We need balance.
Without severe structural changes to how these apps are allowed to operate, we are simply trading public welfare for state revenue and digital engagement metrics.
Yet, despite our different philosophical frameworks, I think there is a clear point of convergence here today. We share a deep, mutual concern regarding the reality of problem gambling.
Absolutely.
Whether the solution lies in better utilizing state tax revenue for intervention programs, as I argue, or implementing stricter federal regulations against predatory behavioral engineering, as you argue, we agree that vulnerable populations need immediate safeguarding.
We do. We both recognize that protecting these individuals must be done without empowering the illicit black market. The true complexity we face lies in balancing personal liberty and economic growth with the severe, undeniable social costs of compulsion.
To truly understand the future of sports gambling, for those of you listening, we encourage you to look deeper into the ongoing battles over regulatory oversight, data privacy, and corporate accountability in your own states.
It's an evolving landscape.
We leave it to you to weigh the evidence and form your own conclusions. But the next time you turn on a game and you see that living, breathing financial ticker flashing across the screen, ask yourself, are we still watching the sport? Or, are we just watching the numbers?